Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Real Estate Hour here on Business Radio, powered by the Wharton School here on Sirius XM Channel 111. I'm your host, Bob Lane. I'm an adjunct professor teaching real estate law and transactions here at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania by night, and my day job for the last almost 40 years is I'm a practicing commercial real estate lawyer as a partner at the law firm of Stevens & Lee. We're live at noon Eastern every Friday, followed by Behind the Markets at 1 p.m. Eastern. As always, you can access past shows via our on-demand feature. If you're listening between 12 noon and 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, June 30th, just before the 4th of July weekend, we're here in the studio for your live questions, so please feel free to call at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. And if you're listening at any other day or time, please email your questions or comments to businessradio@SiriusXM.com. And I'll be happy to address any questions or comments on my next show or by email if possible. So again, if you have a question or you want to join today's discussion, please give us a call at 1-844-WHARTON, 1-844-942-7866, or email at businessradio@SiriusXM.com. And remember, like many in high places do, you can follow us on Twitter at BizRadio111. My guest today is a really fascinating guy, Mike Jones. Mike is the president of United Real Estate Holdings, United Country Auction Services, United Strategic Client Services, and the Texas Auction Academy. He's been an auctioneer since 1978, so I think he knows what he's doing by now, and a real estate broker as well. Mike has conducted over 3,000 real estate auctions. He served as the 56th president of the National Auctioneers Association, and in 2 weeks he's going in as the president of the National Auctioneer Foundation. He'll tell you more about that. He's the 1998 International Auctioneer Champion. You didn't know there was a contest on these things, but there is. It's really very highly sought, and Mike's been the champion. And he's also in the Auctioneer Hall of Fame. He's also a recent graduate of the U.S. Army War College, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. It's a really interesting story. Mike oversees the nation's largest integrated real estate and auction franchise system in the country. And our theme today will be, you can guess it, the issues, the pros and cons of using the auction option for selling real estate or disposing of it. And of course, we're going to get into a how-to for those who want to pursue it and what to avoid and what to look for. So, of course, again, as I said, we welcome your calls throughout the hour. Any experiences you've had with auctions, questions, or hopes or dreams, and we'll be happy to address your other real estate questions as well. Again, the number is 1-844-WHARTON, 1-844-942-7866, and we're live on Friday, June 30th. But now let me officially welcome our guest, Mike Jones. Mike, welcome to the Real Estate Hour.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Glad to be on, Bob.
It's great to have you. Perhaps we can start out. I think I hit some of the highlights of your career, but there's a fascinating story as to how you got into this business and your background. Would you mind telling our listeners a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, as a young man, I was growing up on a family farm north of Dallas, and was able to attend auctions. My grandfather was an avid follower of auctions, and so that was kind of our fun time. And so they were our entertainment when I was growing up. And then my parents got into going to antique auctions. And then when I was in high school in Houston, I worked for an antique auction gallery, and that was pretty basic labor. And but that led to being exposed to a very good auctioneer, and I got to see how it worked. And I had always had an interest in media and communication, and so the combination of being in the realm of high-end artwork and things of that nature in the auction profession, and then along with the communication skills that are required, it was really kind of a neat fit. So after my first year of college at North Texas, I attended auctioneering school. There were about 207 people in my class, and started my auction career immediately upon returning to auction school. Went back to college and got all of my real estate courses and accounting and psychology classes out of the way, and it's just been a great fit. So here we are 38 years later, and and we're still in the auction business.
Mike, what this? I never knew there was an auctioneering school. Can you? I mean, is it something where you go and you practice the go sold? You see on TV. What nobody can. I'm sure that's not the. I know that's not the reality because I've been to a lot of auctions. But tell us something about auctioneering school. It sounds like it's.
Well, there's probably 4 or 5 well-known auctioneering schools across the United States. My company is the Texas Auction Academy here in Dallas, and we've been operating that school as of 2 weeks ago, 25 years. So I've trained about 3,000 auctioneers and some champion auctioneers and very successful business people and people who do just the chant. There's a difference between running an auction company and being a pure bid caller. A bid caller would be somebody who's hired by an auto auction like Manheim or possibly a cattle operation. So that's kind of those are more of the dealer type sales. The dealer sales, it's a very hard, fast sales method. And then you have people who are running auction companies. It could be a real estate auction company. It could be an antique auction gallery. It could be someone who's working at Christie's or Sotheby's, Heritage Gallery, some of those types of operations. And we train basically the auction method of marketing, and we teach marketing itself. And then we also get into the specifics like contracts, how to do contracts, the chant itself, the things that go along with learning the chant, which includes rhythm and counting and numbers. And it's a short period of time, but it's pretty intense. And so our classes run for 8 days. They start on a Friday, they end on a Friday. They're long days, very intense, but people love it. And we've had a great time teaching auction school. But yes, in order for someone to be really good at this, it really helps if they attend a quality school, and we're proud of the school that we have.
Yeah. Well, I hope to hear from some of our listeners actually during the course of the hour on what their experiences are with auctions. I've had, as you and I've talked about, I've had a lot of experiences going to auctions and even being a layman auctioneer for like some local charities that I've been on the board of. And then when we have professional auctioneers and like you, it's night and day. I mean, you guys really know what you're doing, and what you call the chant is really gets people into the I guess, as you put the rhythm of the bid, and it's pretty exciting.
Well, there is an excitement factor that's involved. I'll tell you this: that when I was vice president of the National Auctioneers Association back in the early 2000s, we actually hired Moore-Pace International and Harris Polling that does the political polling services, and we hired those two firms to track what buyers liked, and we did a survey to find out the number one reason or the number 2, 3, 4, 5 reason that people go to auctions. And the funny thing is we spent about $250,000 to come up with a 3-letter word. And the word was fun. People go to auctions because they're fun. And it wasn't the bottom line was, yes, they'd like to get a buy. They're interested in the merchandise, but that was like number 3 or 4. That wasn't the primary reason people went. They just have fun. And, you're talking about fundraising events, as you are aware. I do a lot of major fundraising. So with the National Auctioneers Association, there's actually a professional designation for fundraising, and it's called the BAS, Benefit Auction Specialist. And so there's a certain number of auctioneers across the United States that have that designation.
So we'll get into a lot of the aspects, both of why people go to auctions, the different kinds of assets or properties or items that are auctioned. Because I know it's very different for real estate than it is for art, or it is for livestock, or all the different kinds of things, antiques that can be auctioned. But do you temper that chant or that approach depending on the nature of the what's being auctioned and who the listeners are or who the bidders are?
Totally. Yep. So you've got your market sales, which I previously mentioned, and then you get into, say, selling high-end real estate, things that the average person doesn't attend on a regular basis. Most people don't go to a real estate auction every weekend. They may only attend one auction their entire life to buy a piece of property that they plan on living on, or maybe it's a business asset. So, you basically have to go from full bore, full rhythmic chant down to a much more condensed version and a much more clearer version. Right. As you can imagine, when you have people of different age ranges, different backgrounds, and even the country that they're from, that all has something to do with the type of style you're going to use. So when I do a fundraiser, if it's for March of Dimes or if it's for the American Cancer Society, that group of people, although they may be affluent and they may go to a lot of fundraising events, you still need to go at a speed that's considerate because of the atmosphere that they're in. It's a social setting, and that's much the same way. I just did an auction this past week in Louisiana on a marina and a travel center. And that auction is much more slowed down. It gives the people time to think. When you're selling something in the $2, $3, $4, $5 million range, you have to give them time to think. Even though they've done their due diligence, they've ran their calculator, they've talked to their accountant, they've talked to their tax person. They understand that it's a huge thing to purchase a multi-million-dollar piece of property. So every bid amounts to quite a bit of money. So you do have to be considerate to those people. And it doesn't matter how much education you have, there's still an adrenaline rush that comes with bidding at an auction, as you know.
Oh, yeah. And I guess totally consistent with what you're saying, so I've had a lot of experience with clients being a commercial real estate lawyer going to sheriff sales, and actually have been the bidder for some of my clients for large properties, some high-profile ones in this area. And the sheriff auctioneer, at those is really auctioning for what I'd call a professional audience. The people who go to sheriff sales are usually professionals. They know what they're doing. They know what to listen for. And those go really quickly. And if you're not ready, that your property could go right by before you've even had a chance to open your mouth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. On the other hand, as you said, I guess if you're dealing with many millions, and even for some, I guess art and other collectibles, it could be tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, where you're not in any hurry because you're not trying to do volume in the lots. You're trying to get as much money as you can for that item. Is that correct?
Well, of course, we have from an auctioneer's position, it's just like a real estate agent or broker. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our seller, and so we owe the buyer disclosure, and we owe them any information that we are aware of that should be explained to them. And I could go into 100 different details on how that works, but the bottom line is we definitely are there to get the most amount of money for the buyer, and at the same time be fair with our we're there for the seller, but we definitely want to make sure that the buyer has full disclosure and there's fairness involved.
Well, we're going to get into some tips for both the buyers and the sellers and how to do this. But before we go on to the next point, Mike, I want to welcome any listeners who have tuned in after we started our hour. You're welcome. Welcome to the Real Estate Hour here on Business Radio, Wharton, powered by the Wharton School on Sirius XM Channel 111. I'm your host, Bob Lane, an adjunct professor teaching real estate law and transactions here at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. And my day job is I'm a practicing commercial real estate lawyer as a partner at the law firm of Stevens & Lee. We're live in the studio on Friday, June 30th, if you're listening, so please call us at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. And if you're listening at any other time or day, feel free to email your questions at businessradio@siriusxm.com. Our guest today is Mike Jones, who is the president of United Real Estate Holdings, the president of United Country Auction Services, United Strategic Client Services, and the Texas Auction Academy. And we're talking about auctions generally, which are really exciting things, but certainly as they pertain to real estate and some other assets. Mike, we've just been talking a bit about your background and also auctions generally and how they differ from, real estate to art to livestock and things like that. So if I guess the bidders who would come to a real estate auction versus maybe a lot of our listeners have had the experiences of going to maybe an antique auction, or maybe if different parts of the country, livestock auctions, things like that. How would you advise people in terms of going to these different kinds of auctions to prepare themselves, for example?
I think I've got several different pieces of advice. One is to go to some auctions, go to other auctions. Watch, if you're interested in buying real estate at auction, go to different auctioneers and see how they sell their real estate. See how the process is handled. See how fast they move through their process. Look at the due diligence that they give to the potential buyers. Make sure that they're giving plenty of information.
In other words, don't make the auction where your heart is set on getting that piece of real estate your first auction.
That is absolutely correct. The best way to be acknowledged in the area of auctioneering is to attend auctions by multiple parties. I wouldn't even go to just one auction. I would go to, if you've got 3 or 4 different real estate auction companies that perform those services, go to all 4 of them. See what kind of bidder package they give, because we're United Country Real Estate and United Real Estate, which is our urban brand. We take a lot of pride in putting together the best property information packets available. And if we're doing commercial, it's the same story. Sometimes the information we provide is volumes because of maybe we're selling an industrial facility, or maybe we're selling a former, and I'll just tell you, we just sold a former Kellogg plant. And we do a lot of industrial facilities. Not a lot of auction companies do those. But when we do those, there's a lot of due diligence, as you well know, environmentals and things of that nature. And we bring in specialists that can help assist us in that information. There's properties that have brownfield implications. I was talking about one yesterday. And so, and I looked at 2 auctions this morning before I made it on this call to talk about auctions. The thing I love about, and I will get back to the point in just a sec, but I enjoy the variety of types of properties. So, whether it's an equine center we just sold Kenny property that Kenny Rogers had developed over in Athens, Georgia, and it's under contract now. And those are fun properties. It's over 1,000 acres. It's got a golf course on it. It's got a 100-stall equestrian center. Not everybody knows how to sell one of those, and not everyone has the money to buy one of those. So, the key is marketing. I like to say we're not really in the auction business. We're in the marketing business, and I think that's extremely important. But from a buyer's standpoint, I'm going to make it to multiple auctions ahead of time. I'm going to see what their due diligence is that they're going to give me. Tell me about that property. I want to see as much information as I can, and don't be intimidated to ask that auctioneer or broker that's involved any question you want to ask. They may tell you, they may not tell you, but at least if you don't ask, you don't have a chance to find out. And never buy, and quite frankly, never buy a piece of property on the spur without having done some due diligence over your own. You need to know what you're buying. Otherwise, it's going to be a train wreck, and you're not going to be happy with what you purchased. And I'll tell you, I live by the sword, and I die by the sword. I have bought properties at auction. I have bought properties on the spur. I've learned lessons. But, there was no handbook or guide when I got in the auction business. I didn't work for an auctioneer. I started my company from scratch. So everything I did was on, I got my master's degree by doing it wrong to find out how to do it right. And so I think that's what's made the last 20 years a lot more enjoyable.
Well, Mike, and listeners, take Mike's advice to heart, because it could not be better advice. When you're, especially with real estate, title is such a thorny issue. And I know if you're going even to a state sheriff's sale around the country, you'll get information about the title. Is this a first mortgage foreclosure? If this is like a public auction, Mike does, I gather, mostly private auctions for sellers as opposed to foreclosed or tax lien properties. But even so, even from the government, you're not necessarily have any recourse on if it's being sold subject to some prior mortgage lien that's not disclosed. They tell you, go do your due diligence for title and everything else because you're at risk. How does it work with your auctions, Mike, in terms of for real estate? I gather you give information out, but people make mistakes. Even title insurance companies make mistakes, but at least there's an insurance policy behind it.
Well, there is, and one of the things that we try to do on just about every single property, and I'm not going to tell you it happens on every single one, but by golly, it's pretty close. We want to make sure we have clear title. And so we're going to get a title opinion that's already been documented that we can provide the buyers. And that's a lot of auctioneers don't do that. And a lot of real estate brokers don't do that. They just take a listing and then hope for the best, and that's not what we do. So we're very, very not, considerate of our buyers. For example, I'll give you another example of something that's a little different that we do that some auctioneers do, but a lot of them don't, and that is home warranties. We offer home warranties on properties at auction. And that was pretty much unheard of 10 years ago. Nobody did that. And my belief system is this. If I can make the buyer comfortable, if I can educate the buyer on the auction process, if I can have, even if I need to do a sit-down seminar the day before or right before the auction and show you how this is going to work, and you can feel comfortable as the buyer knowing that you've got a clear title, you've got a warranty available on that house. You can't tell me that property is not going to bring more money because there's a comfort level with the buyer. And the seller has the comfort of knowing that you're knowledgeable in what you're doing and it's not your first time to do an auction. So I think it's extremely important. I've got a property right now that is in Ohio. It's called Clearwater Preserve on the Sandusky Bay. It's a very unique property. It's 700 acres. It's right on the Sandusky Bay, right near Lake Erie. Super property, but a very unique property and one that it's going to take a special buyer for. And when previously it had been an industrial site years ago, and but it's been worked on, it's been fixed up, it looks great, it's got waterfront, and I'm telling you, those are the properties that make it fun to be in the auction business because they're unique.
Yeah, and a property like that would be very exciting for people in the industry, real estate developers perhaps, assuming it's developable. But my regular listeners will know, I'm always talking, no matter what the context is, about risk and reward. Seems to come up in real estate, investing, financing, developing on it, and it seems to me in auctions it's as relevant a concept as any, or as applicable a concept, in that, and what your job is, you've just explained, is to reduce the risk to the auction bidder by giving the warranties, giving title, to having credibility as you have, because if I were going in to bid on a gorgeous piece of 700 acres as you just talked about, because I want to develop it, well, I don't know whether there's environmental problems, I don't know what the zoning is, I don't know what the neighborhood restrictions might be, or opposition, just civic opposition to approvals I might want. So there's a lot of risk there. Of course, the reward could be great, but it's probably, as I tell my students when we talk about distressed properties and auctions and sheriff sales, it's not for the faint of heart. Would you agree with that, Mike?
I think that the key to being involved in this realm of sales is to be knowledgeable. And I think you have to study. Here's the beautiful thing, and you know this, Bob. Today, with the advent of the computer and the technology we have, you can get online and learn so much about a piece of property ahead of time. The records are clear. Buyers today search the internet first before they ever contact you about buying that property. They don't come to you first. They go to the internet first, and they do some of their own due diligence, and then they're going to come to you, and they're going to want to know about that property. And that's why it's imperative that the agent and the broker or the auctioneer that's involved be investing the time themselves to really know that property. So for example, just like on that 700 acres in Sandusky Bay, right off of Sandusky Bay, I've been up there 3 or 4 times. I live in Dallas, but I've flown up multiple times. I've been in a helicopter a couple of times, toured the entire area. I know where everything is. and I know the benefits to it. And if there's any pitfalls, then I'm going to know about that. I'm going to know where the airports are. I'm going to know where the right-of-ways are. I want to know where the easements are. I want to know about the utility access. So there's a lot of things that come with a property that's developable. Now, quite frankly, I'm not interested in taking on properties that have so many issues that it makes it almost unsellable. We like to spend our time focusing on high-end, high-quality properties, and not to say we don't ever sell distressed properties, because of course, we'll do 3,000 auctions this year. My firm will. Well, if you're going to do 3,000 auctions, I can tell you there's going to be some properties that fall in there that may not be perfect. But my goal is to vet out higher quality properties, motivated sellers, and be able to show the positive benefits. I'll also tell you this. We probably only take 1 out of 10 opportunities. Out of 10 properties that I look at, we will probably only take 1. 2 would be unusual. I've got a property that in Dallas right now that's, it's a 9,500 square foot plus or minus home in North Dallas in Preston Hollow, which is in the most expensive part of Dallas. It's in the same neighborhood with George W. Bush. In fact, Laura Bush toured the property with me probably, 4 or 5 months ago, and we didn't take it to auction. We took it to a traditional listing, and that's one of the differences in our firm and a lot of other auction companies. There's some auction companies only do auction. Well, that's not what we do. We changed the method of franchise sales in the United States when we already had an 80-year-old company and injected auctions into it. So what we did is made auctions a new tool for the agents and brokers toolbox, and that's a differentiator. You want to be a differentiator and be a bit disruptive. So when I go look at a property, I'm looking at it from multiple positions. If it's not a good fit for an auction, we'll look at it as a traditional listing, and vice versa. Or we may take it as a traditional listing, and with the understanding that in 90 days, if we've not seen a buyer, the seller may want to be motivated enough to do an auction. And here again, I don't really care whether you call it an auction or an accelerated marketing plan. If it increases the eyes and the visibility, that's what people want, and that's to get eyes on that property.
Well, you clearly have in your company a lot of really well-trained staff. How many agents, brokers, auctioneers, researchers does your company have, more or less?
We have approximately 6,000 to 7,000 agents and brokers and auctioneers. Specifically, we have roughly 250 auctioneers in the company, which is the most anywhere in the world. And then on top of that, we have 2 corporate offices. We have our United Country Auction office and United Country Real Estate office in Kansas City, which is the original home place of the mothership. And we have about 50 employees there, and all they do is track real estate and do marketing. We have an online catalog. We were the first real estate company in America to have a what I would call like a Sears and Roebuck catalog.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's totally clear from this, listeners, and we're going to have to take a short break in a second, just a 3-minute break, so stay with us. But it's very clear from all this that not only do you have to do due diligence on the asset you're looking at going to an auction, whether it's real estate or art or anything else, but you got to do due diligence on the company that's doing the auction and what their track record and credibility, and it's as clear as you're listening to Mike, what goes into the homework and the preparation that the auctioneering company does so that you know who you're dealing with. So that's terrific. But we're going to come back, and Mike's going to give us a lot of good advice and tips, some things that you won't hear anywhere else, for both buyers who are going to auctions as well as sellers who have properties that they want to dispose of, especially in difficult markets, how to get the most for it. So please stay with us, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mike Jones, the president of Auction Services for United Real Estate Holdings. And if you want to join the conversation or ask any questions, please call us at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. We do have a caller holding. Lynn, please stay with us, and we'll get your call as soon as we come back. I'm your host, Bob Lane. You're listening to Business Radio on Sirius XM 111.
You're listening to The Real Estate Hour on Business Radio, powered by the Wharton School, Sirius XM 111. Here again is Bob Lane.
Welcome back, listeners. For those who've been with us, thanks for staying with us. And welcome to any new listeners who are just joining us. You're listening to the Real Estate Hour on Business Radio, Sirius XM 111. I'm your host, Bob Lane, an adjunct professor teaching real estate law and transactions here at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania by night. And by day, I'm a commercial real estate lawyer as a partner at the firm of Stevens & Lee. If you want to join our conversation or ask any questions, please call us at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. And if you're calling or listening on June 30th, we're live in the studio. At any other time, feel free to email your questions or comments at businessradio@siriusxm.com. And as those who have stayed with us know, we're listening to Mike Jones, the president of Auction Services for the United Real Estate Holdings Company. And we're going to get to a lot of tips and more insight on auctioneering. But first, we have a very patient caller, Lynn from Philadelphia. Welcome to the Real Estate Hour. How can we help you?
Hi. So I have a question for Mike Jones. I'm sort of an entrepreneur, and I wanted to know what he thought were the personal characteristics for a successful auctioneer, and also either or one or both of these questions. What is the hardest part of this job? What is his daily struggle?
Those are great questions, Lynn. Thanks for calling. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. Well, I think there's two things to think about here, Bob. And one is there's the live auction, there's the online auction, there's the simulcast auction where you're doing both a live auction in conjunction with technology, and then you also have things like a sealed bid. So there's varying levels. So it's kind of interesting. If you'd have asked me that question 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I would have told you it would have been a cookie-cutter answer, and that would be you need to have a good personality, you need to be a people person, you need to be a salesman. You need, and don't take this the wrong way, because I'm not advocating that they be an attorney, but they have to be at least versed well enough in the law to where they understand what can get them in trouble and things that are not in the best interest of a seller. And so, basically, we're always having to help them. You have to have empathy. You have to empathize with the people that are making decisions. You got to remember, so many of the people that we work for are in a difficult time. They may be dealing with an estate. They may be dealing with financial hardship from time to time. They could be going through a divorce. So there's lots of things that cause people to have auctions. I think when I'm teaching my auction school classes, it's extremely important that you have that ability to sit down with somebody and have a conversation and be sincere and invest time in them, because people want that connection. And I think that there's a reason why certain people are super successful salespeople, and it's usually because they have that natural ability to connect with folks. Now, having said all that, and I can tell you too, Bob, if Lynn is really interested, I can tell her where to go and actually look at the outline, the syllabus for our classes, where she can see exactly what an auctioneer.
Well, I infer from Lynn's question that she does have that in mind, but we'll find out. But it sounds like in my experience, some people have great people skills one-on-one. They can give their total attention to the person they're speaking to, and others really could be much more, a little bit maybe more ADD, but have great public people skills. And it seems to be an auctioneer, you got to have both.
Well, you do. And she also asked, what are the most challenging things? I'm paraphrasing. What are the most challenging things that I deal with on a regular basis? It's very different for me because I'm in a different level of auctioneering. I've been doing this so long, and I'm an executive in the company. So I'm wearing a lot of different hats in this. I'm teaching a lot, and I'm instructing our employees, and I'm working with our franchise salespeople, and I'm dealing with commercial brokers, and I'm dealing with owners of very expensive real estate. For example, if you go to our website talking about the Kenny Rogers property, well, there's a video of Kenny Rogers talking about his property that we're selling. And so, to have those types of people, those types of clients, there's a different touch and feel that you have. So now, if you're starting out as an auctioneer, I just left a young auctioneer this morning that I instructed about a year or two ago. He started his auction company, and he's killing it. He's just a natural. He made $80,000 in the first 3 months after he left auction school. Well, let me tell you something. Auction school only cost about $1,400. So that was a really good investment for him. And there's a lot of people like that. But I think the people that, I always compare this to professional golf. There's a certain number of people, it's that 80-20 rule, and maybe 90-10. The people that hit the ground running and have a business plan and a desire and a love for something, and they embrace it and they have that passion, they're going to be way more successful than someone who does it just because they think they can make a quick buck.
And I think that probably applies to just about everything. So, Lynn, did we infer right? Is that something that you're interested in pursuing? Are you still with us?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So this would be sort of my fifth career. I'm an entrepreneur in Philly, and it would, for me, probably pull together a lot of my abilities. But I find it so interesting that in the end it's about people and really it's a sales. It's concentrated in sales. So. Very interesting. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Yeah, well, thank you for calling. That was a terrific question. And for any new listeners who have just joined us, feel free to call with your questions or experiences at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. I'm your host, Bob Lane. You're listening to Business Radio on Sirius XM 111, and we're talking with Mike Jones, the president of Auction Services for United Real Estate Holdings. Mike, what... we're going to come to some tips for people who want to sell their properties, as well as I think we've talked a lot for buyers. But what kind of properties do you specialize in, or do you think are most appropriate for auctioning from your standpoint, and the kind of sales that you do?
Well, I think it's funny. When I first started out many, many years ago, it was primarily residential and small commercial properties. Very, very limited in the development land area. We're the largest land company in America, so we have a finger on the pulse of land sales. And having over 550 offices nationwide, we see those sales coming in because they're reported to us. So we can see where the hot spots are in the United States. And we have a relationship with a company called PRD in Australia. So we created an alliance, a strategic partnership called United PRD in Australia. We've got about 150 to 200 offices there. So, when I joined United Country, we were only in the United States. It was a 80-year-old company in the United States that started out as a farm and ranch company. Today, we're in Costa Rica and Mexico and Panama and getting ready to go into Canada. So we're on a fast. I'll tell you the big game changer, Bob, and that was technology.
Oh, I can imagine.
Our ownership, when we came in and bought that company, we injected technology. They had technology before. It was one of the earlier groups that embraced technology. But our ownership group was Microsoft's Global Partner of the Year. And so it's tuned into technology. And it's all about search engine optimization and indexing our properties and things that I knew nothing about when I joined this company. And now I have some knowledge. And I'll tell you what, we have specialty property groups. We call them SPGs, and most companies don't even know what an SPG is. But a specialty property group, we have dialed down and condensed down to the types of properties we sell. So there's a specialist that's in charge of certain types of assets. So if you have a golf course or golf course lots or golf course assets, we have a golf specialty group. We do the same thing with horses and equine. We do the same thing with land and farms and ranches. We do the same thing with waterfront, whether it's ocean or lake. So I think that's a differentiator too. And quite frankly, our offices sell all types of real estate. I mean, literally all types of real estate. However, United SCS, which is the group I head up here in Dallas, which I'm the broker, internal broker of, allows me to do opportunities that other people don't get to. But I'm pursuing them. I'm pursuing large deals. So like the Kenny Rogers property or the Clearwater Preserve in Sandusky Bay or a historic steakhouse in the middle of New Mexico between Roswell and Ruidoso. Yep. We just did that last year. And that was a very unique property. And here again, it goes back to education. We go in there to sell a restaurant for a couple who were going through a divorce, and we end up breaking the liquor license out from the actual physical property because the liquor license in New Mexico is worth more than the property because they don't issue new liquor licenses in New Mexico. But if we hadn't done our homework and understood that, we might have stood there and auctioned off the license with the building. Well, we ended up offering it separately, and the liquor license brought twice as much as the physical property and went to a convenience store company that wanted to have a convenience store nearby with liquor and wine available.
So you're not only the auctioneer for the property, you're really a consultant in a way, and helping owners of property sort of figure out what's the best way to market their property, to either break it up or keep it whole or whatever.
Absolutely. And I would say that probably consulting is about probably 40% of my time, because I have to meet with the owners ahead of time. We have a lot of discussions. We learn as much as we can about the property. What's the seller's motivation? Why are they doing it? I had that discussion this morning with a lady. Why are you selling this? And I think you have to know the questions to ask. And if you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answer at the end of the day.
Well, that's a great segue. I'm sorry, Mike, because I want to drill down on that a bit. I have a client now who's got a property, a several $1 million property, and so should it stay on the market, or is an auction the best way to move it along? Is the question that she has. So how would you go about counseling that kind of situation?
Well,
this is a residence, a high-end residence.
Well, I've got an auction. I'm going to give you an example based on that scenario. I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going into a market right now in Illinois. Okay.
Hello.
You there?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So I'm basically selling a golf course property. It sits on a golf course called the General. The General is in Galena, Illinois. And so here's this home. It's a nice home sitting on the golf course. And they want to sell the home and everything in it because they're moving to San Diego. They want to go where they can play golf, and they can do it every day. And they can't do that in Galena, Illinois. And they're getting older. She's a former professional golfer. He has been the past president of the American Golf Association. So they're well-known people in the golfing community. Well, the first question I had to the local brokers in that community was, how many properties are for sale in this market? And the gentleman that I spoke to knew exactly. He said there's 178 properties. Well, Bob, as you well know, 178 properties in a town the size of Galena, Illinois, you've got to put a spotlight on that property. The only way you're going to sell that property expeditiously is to put a flashlight on it. And so I use this as an example. And our CEO told me this several years ago. He said, fill up a room with white ping pong balls. Put ping pong balls, cover the floor to where you can't see anything but ping pong balls. And then take one ping pong ball and paint it red and put it right in the middle of the room. Or put it anywhere you want to. Which ping pong ball are you going to look at? You're going to look at the red one.
Of course, yeah.
And that's what we do. We market. We have a professional team. We do marketing proposals. We do presentations. We do research. We track everything that we do. When we get through with a project, we can tell you how many people looked at what website and what country it came from. It's very important that you're able to provide intelligence based on the performance of your marketing and PR. I would go in and look at the property initially. I would fly in, look at it, assess it, see the market condition, and then I'd come back with a proposal, a presentation, and then a marketing presentation. And that's how we're going to do it. But here's some keys, too, that you need to remember. You have to make sure that you have the right seller, okay? The seller has to be motivated. The seller needs to have some equity in that property. The seller needs to be willing to negotiate. If you come in and look at a $10 million property, and I've got one right now down in Florida that I'm looking at, if they've got it previously listed at $10 million and it's been listed for $10 million for 2 years, and you come in and you say, what do you have to have for that property, Bob? And they tell you $10 million and I can't take a dime less, they're probably not a good prospect
Right.
for an auction.
The market has told them that they can't sell it for $10 million. You're absolutely
That's
right.
it.
So let's drill down into I want to get into the weeds a little bit, into how the process works and how a property owner who's going to negotiate with you or to make a deal with an auctioneer generally, and certainly your company would be the example. Before we do, I just want to welcome any new listeners. You're listening to the Real Estate Hour here on Sirius XM 111, the business channel, powered by the Wharton School. And if you want to call us, while we still have a little bit time left for our hour, call at 1-844-WHARTON. That's 1-844-942-7866. I'm your host, Bob Lane, and we're talking to Mike Jones, president of Auction Services for United Real Estate Holdings. So Mike, let's say the seller says, "Okay, I've been listening to the Real Estate Hour. I think this auction idea is a great one. I'm going to call Mike up, and what's the deal? What do they pay you? What do what are their guarantees? Are there upset prices? Are there if they have a broker that's already working? Do they pay a broker and pay the auction? How does it work?"
We have several different programs, so it's not a cookie-cutter approach. We've discovered over time that every property has its own unique attributes, and also the price range has a lot to do with it. But we do co-broke with a lot of existing agents and brokers, whether it's one of our United Real Estate, we have an office in Philadelphia, United Real Estate, or whether it's a United Country office in one of our rural areas. We do co-broke. Now, a lot of times, and most of the time, I would say, there's a buyer's premium involved, especially in the higher-end properties, which is pretty typical. I was one of the first auctioneers to embrace the buyer's premium back in 1988. If you've ever bought anything from Christie's or Sotheby's or any of the other large galleries in New York, you're going to pay buyer's premium. And that's one of the ways for the seller to offset the cost of having the auction.
Meaning the buyer is going to pay that, not the seller, right?
That's right. Yeah. Now there may be a small fee to the seller. Maybe they pick up a buyer's agent fee, but typically we're going to create an arrangement and co-broke with the existing agent that has that property, because the agent wants to sell the property. If they've been sitting there for 12 or 24 months. Trying to get this property sold, and they know that the seller is willing to have an auction, then they just need to bring in a qualified auction company like ours, and then we'll come in and we'll show them what we can do, and it's a fair split, and they're going to make just as much working with us as they will if they did it themselves. That's the nice thing about it. They're the listing broker. They're going to get the listing side of it, and then if someone brings in a buyer, then the buyer's broker or buyer's agent, they get paid. And there's enough, usually in the buyer's premium, there's enough for those folks to get paid and us, and it's a reasonable deal. That's the other thing about our company. We're not greedy. We have a philosophy about that. Pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. Yeah. and you have to be realistic here. You can be greedy. And my goal is to do the deal. I tell everyone I do an auction for, and I just had this conversation in Louisiana 3 months ago before we did this marina sale that we just got completed yesterday. I want you to be my friend when this is over. I can do all the auctions I want to. Okay, quite frankly, I've got a machine that gives me those opportunities. But I want to have a friend that I have worked for who is going to refer more business to me, who's willing to write me a reference letter when it's over with, because I did everything I told them I would do. I didn't feed them any pie in the sky. That's the other thing I would say for anyone wanting to have an auction. Just make sure that you're dealing with someone that's sincere, that has a resume, that people are willing to stand up for as a previous client and brag on them and say, absolutely, I'd recommend that person. Yeah, and if you can't get that type of if you can't get that kind of response, then you may not be dealing with the right person. And I would also say, deal with being the past president and chairman of the National Auctioneer Association, deal with someone who invests in the industry, who stays a part of a professional association like the National Auctioneer Association and the various state associations, because those are people who typically are in the educational classes. They stay on the cutting edge of technology. They're networkers. They know more people. They bring more people to the table.
So let me ask you this. Let's say and it's a property. Let's say like your example. It's a $10 million property that was being marketed for a few years, and let's say the seller's just ready to dispose of it, and the 10 million becomes 8 million, becomes 7 million, whatever, and they want to sell it for anything they can get over 5 million. I would think that most people who go to auctions, unless they're going to Sotheby's to buy a Van Gogh and there's going to be a lot of interest in it, they're expecting to get a deal. They're expecting to get the property for less than they would have to pay on the open market. Is that true? I mean,
I think the people today are smarter than they've ever been. I think they're more educated than they've ever been. The buyers that come to our sales, they've already done a lot of research. They probably already have someone in place they're working with. They may have they probably already know what the going rate is per square foot in that neighborhood. Things like television shows, that we have that are all about real estate.
Yeah.
The fact that we have home improvement centers that tell you everything about what it costs to put in new tile flooring and everything. I think people are smarter. Do they want a deal? Yes. But the economy's picking up, and for example, our vice president here in Dallas just sold his condominium downtown, and he had 7 offers in one day, and they paid more than list price, considerably more than list price. So the market is changing. Now, I'm not going to tell you there's not some dead spots in America, because there are, and I travel to those places, and I know that there's a surplus of a certain price range of homes. But I do believe that people are looking for a deal. But I think if you have a quality home, I think and you're willing to move on your price, then you've got a better chance of doing it. There's 2 types of auctions. There's an absolute auction, which means once the auctioneer opens it up and a bid is accepted, then it's going to sell to someone at some price. A reserve auction is when you establish a price that you have to have for the property prior to the auction. In my position, I pretty much tell my clients now, you can have a reserve, and I'll be happy to have that reserve in my data bank, in my mind. But go into this with an open mind. Let us market the property. Let us see what the interest level is for that property. Let's expose it to the market. Let's put it up for sale. Let's see what the offers are.
Oh, so what you would do is you would actually, before going to the auction, you would try to market it yourself, even though some other broker had tried it for a while. You'd want to explore that option.
Well, we can do that or not. That's not really what I was saying. Oh. Really what I'm saying is let's come up with an offer from the auction, present that to the seller, regardless of what it is, and let the seller decide, can I accept that? If you've got a $10 million price tag on it, look, everybody tells you they have to have X. Most of the time it's Y. And
right.
That's something I learned a long time ago. You tell me you got to have 10. Well, what if I get you 9? Well, yeah, I'd probably have to consider that. Well, what if I got you 8? Well, I'd probably look at it. So that's the whole point. All of a sudden, we've gone from 10 to 8, and we haven't even had an auction yet.
Right. And Mike, I have to interrupt you because I'm going to have to wrap this up. We're going to have a hard stop in a few seconds. Sure. But this has been great advice, and I hope we could go on for another hour, and hopefully we'll do this again. But we are at the end of our hour. Listeners, thank you so much for staying with us. You can tell that Mike Jones knows everything there is to know about auctioneering. You've been listening to the Real Estate Hour on Sirius XM 111. Thank you so much, Mike, for an entertaining and terrific hour together. I want to thank my producer, Patty Hall, sound engineer, Danielle Bruno, for making us sound so great. And I hope to see you all next week at noon Eastern. Thanks for being with us.